I've shot a lot of guns over the years, and I'll tell you straight. Some brands I'd trust with my life, and others I wouldn't touch if you gave them to me for free. So I sat down, lined up 12 of the biggest names, and I'm going to rank them from the ones that make me nervous to the ones I'd bet everything on. This is Ted from Line 45, and today we're digging through the good, the bad, and the flat-out ugly of the gun world, brands stacked worst to best, so you know exactly which ones deserve a spot on your hip and which ones belong at the pawn shop. Before we dive in, do me a solid. Smash that subscribe, tap the bell, hit all the dang buttons down there. You don't gotta, but it keeps this train rolling and lets me crank out more of this wild gun talk for y'all. All right, enough of that. Let's get back to it. Absolute worst. When we're talking about the bottom of the barrel, there's really no debate. The first spot has to go to what everybody knows as the Saturday night specials, brands like Lorson, Raven, Jennings, Jimenez, and Brico. These were the cheap, zinc alloy pistols cranked out in the 70 seconds through the 90 seconds, mostly around Southern California. They sold for under $100 back then, and the whole point was affordable firepower. The problem was, they were so cheaply made that safety was basically an afterthought. Slides cracked, frames warped, and there were endless stories of accidental discharges. Most of those companies got wiped out by lawsuits or just flat-out bankruptcy. Jimenez Arms was the last holdout, and even they shut down in 2020 after regulators in Nevada came down on them. Right above that, I put Taurus. Now, don't get me wrong, Taurus has made some strides in recent years, but its track record still haunts it. They had that huge class action settlement back in 2016 over 9 pistol models that could fire when dropped, or even with the safety on. And more recently, their GX4 Micro Compact had a safety notice for potential drop fire issues. They're affordable, and they've got some fans, but when you've got that many recalls and lawsuits on your record, it's hard to put any trust in them for a gun you'd stake your life on. And that's how we're kicking this list off. Brands with reputations built on lawsuits, recalls, and failures. From here, we'll climb up to names that at least earn some respect. Hit-or-miss brands. So let's talk about Kel-Tec. I've owned a few over the years, and here's the deal. They've always been the brand that tries stuff nobody else will. Folding carbines, super compact rifles, and the KSG shotgun with twin tubes. They're creative, no doubt. But every time I shot one, I felt like it was either a gem or a headache. One SUB 20000 I had run flawlessly, the next one jammed like crazy. That kind of inconsistency is what puts them near the bottom of this list. And yeah, Kel-Tec had to issue a recall on the SUB 2000 because of a heat treat issue on the barrel that could cause it to fail. When we're talking life and death reliability, that's tough to overlook. Then there's Remington. Now everybody knows the name. The 870 shotgun is a legend, and the Model 700 rifle's been in deer camps forever. But Remington hit some rough years. The X-Mark Pro triggers on the 700 seconds had problems. So bad that they recalled millions of rifles because they could fire without anyone touching the trigger. That was huge. Add in the bankruptcies, the split up of the company, and quality slipping during that time. And a lot of shooters lost confidence. Ream Arms is building guns again under the Remington banner, but that trust is going to take time to rebuild. So yeah, Kel-Tec with its hit-or-miss builds, and Remington with its baggage, that's why they sit here on the list. Both have their fans, but I wouldn't put them higher than this. Solid but not bulletproof brands. Walther's a brand I respect, but they've always been kind of niche here in the States. The PPQ had one of the best striker-fired triggers I've ever shot, no question. The PDP is solid too. It's accurate, reliable, and you see some cops carrying it in Europe. But here's the thing. They don't have the same track record of mass adoption in the US like Glock or Smith. And support can be hit or miss, holsters, parts, aftermarket, it's just not as built out. Great guns, but when you talk about a brand you'd trust your life to, I can't rank them higher because their footprint just isn't as deep. Ruger, on the other hand, is everywhere. I've shot a pile of Ruger revolvers in 10 divided by 22 seconds, and those things run forever. The GP100 is a tank, and the 10/22 has been the .22 rifle for generations. Where Ruger slips is on their semi-auto pistols. They've had some good ones like the SR series, and more recently the Max 9, but they've never dominated the carry or duty space. They're affordable and reliable enough for most folks, but when you stack them up against the heavy hitters, Ruger usually ends up being a solid budget option instead of the first choice for professionals. So Walther and Ruger sit here in the middle. Both brands make solid guns, no question, but they don't carry the same universal trust as the names further up this list. Proven brands, but with a bit of baggage. I've run a handful of Springfields over the years. The Hellcat was one of the first micro-compacts that really nailed capacity in such a small frame, and it shoots way better than its size suggests. I've also had time behind the Echelon, and that pistol feels like Springfield finally built something meant to live on a duty belt. Accurate, reliable, easy to run. But Springfield's name still carries that bruise from the Illinois political mess years back. A lot of shooters didn't like how that went down, and even though the guns are good, some folks still won't touch them because of it. CZ is on a different track. The CZ-75 is one of the smoothest steel frame pistols I've ever shot, and that platform's been trusted for decades. Their competition guns, like the Shadow 2, absolute tack drivers. And the P10 series gives them a striker-fired pistol that actually holds its own against the bigger names. Where CZ lags is support here in the States. You don't see them on every shelf, and grabbing mags or parts isn't always simple. That doesn't make the guns bad, they're great, but it does make ownership less convenient if something breaks or you want to customize. So Springfield and CZ land here. Both make guns I'd have no problem shooting or carrying, but the politics tied to one and the limited support tied to the other keep them from climbing any higher. Strong brands, yeah, you'll love these ones. FN's one of those names you can't ignore. They've been cranking out guns for the military forever. The M249 SAW, the M240, even the SCAR rifles. I've shot their pistols, like the FNX-45 and the 509, and they run smoothly. The 509, in particular, was built to compete for the Army's handgun contract, so you know it was stress-tested hard. The issue with FN isn't reliability, it's adoption. Outside of a few agencies, you just don't see them in as many holsters as Glock or Smith. And for regular shooters, the price tag on FN pistols usually makes folks look elsewhere. Solid guns, just not the most common choice. Sig Sauer sits in a different spot. The P320 blew up in popularity after the Army picked it as the M17 or M18, and a ton of police departments followed. I've shot a pile of P320 and they're accurate, modular, and have a ton of aftermarket support. But they come with baggage. The whole drop fire controversy and the lawsuits around unintentional discharges put a dent in SIG's reputation. SIG put out their voluntary upgrade program, but the lawsuits are still rolling, even as recently as this year. That kind of cloud doesn't just disappear. So FN and SIG both make strong, modern handguns that I'd shoot any day of the week, but between FN's limited footprint and SIG's legal baggage, they settle right here on the list. Respected, reliable, but not top tier. The workhorse brand. Smith & Wesson has been around so long that it's hard to even picture the American gun scene without them. I've shot their revolvers, their M, Ps, even some of their older autos, and the one thing that sticks out is consistency. The M&P line, especially the M&P 2.0 pistols, has become a real go-to for both civilians and law enforcement. I've put thousands of rounds through one, and it just kept eating whatever I fed it. That kind of reliability is what keeps them high on my list. Now, to be fair, S&W isn't perfect. The original Shield had a safety alert back in 2013, and they handled it with inspections and fixes. But those issues never became systemic like we've seen with some other brands. For the most part, their recalls are rare, and the guns keep showing up in holsters all over the country. A lot of cops carry them, a lot of concealed carriers carry them, and you see them on ranges every weekend. What I like most is how they balance affordability with quality. You don't feel like you're paying a premium just for a name. You're paying for a gun that's been tested, proven, and backed by decades of use. That puts Smith & Wesson right up near the top, because when I ask myself if I'd trust my life to it, the answer's yes without hesitation. The undisputed benchmark. Many will hate me for this. When you stack every brand against each other, Glock ends up on top for one simple reason. They just work. I've carried them, I've shot them in matches, I've trained with them, and they keep running. That's why you see so many cops with them on their hips, why the militaries use them in different roles, and why so many concealed carriers pick them. You don't get to that level of adoption unless the guns prove themselves day in and day out. Now, are they flashy? Not at all. Glocks are about as plain as it gets. No crazy triggers out of the box, no unique styling. But that's never been the point. The point is, a pistol that can handle abuse, go thousands of rounds without a hiccup, and have parts and mags available everywhere. If something does break, fixing it is simple and cheap. That matters when you're talking about a gun you trust your life with. I've seen Glocks run filthy, bone dry, even after being dropped in the dirt, and they still cycle. Add to that the endless aftermarket. Sights, triggers, holsters, whatever you want, and you've got a platform that adapts to anybody's needs. So when this whole list gets boiled down, Glock earns the top spot. Not because they're exciting, but because they're dependable in a way few others can match. If I had to pick one brand to bet everything on, it'd be Glock.